Jong-su, Seoul's most feared mafia boss, staggers into an abandoned subway station at 2 a.m., bleeding from a failed ambush by a rival gang. As he contemplates his next move, whether to call for backup or handle this alone, a 6-year-old black girl named Zendoya emerges from the shadows, lost and searching for her foster mother who works the night shift nearby. Instead of running from the bleeding, tattooed man in the expensive suit, she approaches him with concern, asking the question that will shatter his carefully constructed armor. "Mister, did someone hurt you?" Her genuine compassion awakens something Jong-su thought died years ago when he chose this life. As he helps her search for her mother through the dangerous streets of Seoul's underworld, Jong-su discovers that Zendoya's foster mother is Dr. Grace Okonkwo, a humanitarian doctor who treated him anonymously 2 years ago after a near-fatal shooting, saving his life while knowing exactly who he was but choosing mercy over judgment. Now, rival gangs are closing in, and Jong-su must protect both the child who sees him as human and the woman who once gave him a second chance at life. Through Zendoya's innocent questions and unwavering trust, Jong-su begins to question whether the violence he's built his empire on is the only path available to him. If this triggered your curiosity, keep watching to see how this interesting story unfolds. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment your thoughts in the comments section.
Jong-su had been untouchable for 12 years. Since he was 17, since the night his grandmother died, and he made the choice that turned him from a boy with bruised knuckles into the man Seoul's underworld whispered about in careful voices. 12 years of building an empire on fear and loyalty and the kind of violence that made examples out of people who forgot their place. 12 years without a single scar that mattered, without a single moment of hesitation. Until tonight. The Cheongdam crew had come for him outside the warehouse in Itaewon. 6 men, professionals, the kind who didn't waste time with warnings. Jong-su had left 3 of them bleeding on the concrete. The other 3 had scattered when his backup arrived, but not before one of them put a blade between his ribs that felt like it was still cutting with every breath. He'd made it 4 blocks before his vision started swimming, before the familiar streets tilted sideways and his legs decided they were done negotiating. The abandoned subway station swallowed him like a mouth closing. Fluorescent lights flickered against cracked tile, the smell of old rain and rust. Somewhere above, sirens wailed past, hunting something, someone, maybe him. Jong-su pressed his back against the cold wall and let himself slide down until he was sitting, one hand clamped over the wound that was making his expensive white shirt into something ruined and dark. His phone vibrated. 3 messages from his second, 2 from lieutenants who needed decisions he couldn't make while bleeding, 1 from a number he didn't recognize, which meant someone had gotten close enough to matter. He silenced it all and focused on breathing without making noise, on thinking through the haze of pain about which safe house was closest, which route was still clean, which of his own people he could still trust after tonight. That's when he heard the footsteps. Small ones, uneven, like someone too young to have figured out rhythm yet. Jong-su's hand moved to the knife at his belt without thought, muscle memory older than choice. He looked up. A little black girl stood at the base of the stairs, backpack too big for her small frame, wearing a pink sweater that had no business existing in a place like this at a time like this. She couldn't have been more than 6. Her hair was pulled back into a small puff decorated with bright clips, yellow and green and red, catching the sick fluorescent light like tiny pieces of color that had wandered into a world drained of it. She should have been afraid. Children knew predators when they saw them, something animal and automatic in the way they recognized danger. Jong-su had seen it 100 times, that instant calculation in young eyes that said run, hide, disappear. This child looked at him and tilted her head with the focused curiosity of someone who had found something that needed examining. "Mister," she said in English, her voice carrying that particular confidence small children have before the world teaches them to doubt themselves. She took 3 steps closer. Jong-su's hand stayed on the knife, but he didn't pull it. "Your shirt is red now." She stopped just outside his reach, crouching down with her backpack sliding off one shoulder. "That means you're hurt bad." Jong-su said nothing. His mind was doing what it always did, calculating, assessing, moving through options like fingers counting beads. She'd seen him. She'd seen his face, the blood, this moment of weakness that men like Min Tae-oh would pay good money to know about. Witnesses were problems. Problems had solutions. He'd learned that lesson when he was 17. The knife at his belt was the same one he'd carried since. But she was 6, maybe younger, and she was looking at him like he was a person who needed help rather than a threat that needed avoiding. "Are you lost?" he asked finally, his voice rougher than he intended. "Yes," she said simply. "No shame in it, just fact. I can't find Mama Grace. She works close," she said, "but everything looks the same when it's dark." She studied his face with the kind of directness only children managed. No performance, no fear. "Are you lost too?" Something in his chest pulled tight that had nothing to do with the knife wound. "What's your name?" he asked, instead of answering. "Zendoya." She pronounced it carefully, like she was used to people getting it wrong. "Zendoya Martin. I'm 6 3/4. She pointed at his side where his hand was still pressed against the wound. "That looks like it hurts." "It does." "Do you need a doctor?" Jong-su looked at this small girl in her bright clips and her too big backpack, asking him, the boss of Seoul's most feared organization, if he needed help. The absurdity of it should have been funny. Instead, it felt like something breaking open inside him that he'd sealed shut when he was 17 and decided that mercy was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. "Your mother," he said quietly, making a choice he didn't understand yet. Zendoya's whole face brightened like someone had switched on a light behind her eyes. She sat down cross-legged on the grimy station floor without hesitation, pulled her backpack onto her lap, and unzipped it with the focused determination of someone beginning important work. "Mama Grace," she said, producing a worn folder with official-looking papers visible at the edges, foster care documents in both English and Korean. She has cloud hair, really big and soft, and she wears a stethoscope around her neck even when she's not working because she says you never know when someone might need help. Jong-su watched her small hands pull out a piece of paper folded carefully into quarters. She smoothed it against her knee and held it up for him to see. A crayon drawing, the kind that lived on refrigerators and in grandmothers' wallets. A woman with an impressive halo of curly hair and round glasses, a stethoscope drawn in careful blue around her neck. Beside her, a smaller figure in pink with detailed hair clips. "That's me and Mama," Zendoya said with the pride of an artist displaying their best work. "She's a doctor. She helps people who are hurt." She looked at the blood seeping between his fingers. "Like you." Jong-su took the drawing carefully, the way you take something that matters to someone. He studied the cloud-haired woman and the small girl in pink, and thought about the last time anyone had shown him something they'd made with the assumption he'd want to see it. He thought about his grandmother's hands. He thought about the choice he'd made at 17. He thought about the knife at his belt and the child sitting cross-legged in front of him, trusting him with his drawing like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Your mother," he said, handing the drawing back. "Where does she work?" The night market in Dongdaemun never truly slept. Even at 3 in the morning, it breathed with its own rhythm. Vendors restocking, late-night food stalls serving workers coming off shifts, the particular energy of a place that existed in the margins between days. Jong-su knew every corner of it. This was his territory, the district where his word carried more weight than any law, where debts were paid and protection was purchased, and everyone understood exactly how the world worked. He moved through it now with Zendoya's small hand wrapped around two of his fingers, her backpack bouncing with each step, completely unaware that the man she was holding on to owned these streets in ways that had nothing to do with property deeds. The knife wound had stopped bleeding, mostly. He'd fashioned a makeshift pressure bandage from his torn undershirt in the station bathroom while Zendoya waited outside, humming something to herself. The pain was manageable now, distant, something his body had learned to file away under necessary discomfort. He'd been hurt worse. He'd keep moving until he couldn't. "Mister?" Zendoya said, looking up at him as they passed a late-night pojang matcha where three men sat drinking soju. "Why do people move away when they see you?" Jong-su glanced at the pojang matcha. The three men had indeed shifted, a subtle repositioning that put more space between themselves and him. Eyes down, conversation continuing in lower voices. He hadn't consciously noticed it until she pointed it out. It was simply what happened, what always happened. "They're giving us room to walk," he said. "But the sidewalk is big already." She looked back at the men, then up at him with that direct, uncomplicated gaze. "Are they scared of you?" Jong-su said nothing. A street vendor selling hotak looked up, caught his eye, and gave a small, respectful nod, the kind of nod that said, "Message received, nothing seen, no questions asked." The vendor's ajuma, without being told, began packing 2 hotaks into paper dags. "Wait here," Jong-su told Zendoya, guiding her to stand near a closed storefront. She obeyed without question, watching as he approached the cart, as the ajuma handed him the food and waved away his money with practiced deference. "Jong-su-nim," she said, quietly, eyes not quite meeting his. "You need anything else?" "You didn't see me tonight." "Of course not." "The child?" "Lost, looking for her mother." The ajuma's expression softened immediately, the way Korean grandmothers' faces did when children were involved. "I hope she finds her." "She will." He returned to Zendoya and handed her one of the warm bags. She opened it immediately, her whole face lighting up at the sweet smell. "It's warm," she said with wonder, like warmth itself was a gift. They kept walking. Zendoya ate her hotak in careful bites, quiet for 30 seconds before the next question arrived. "Do you have a family?" Jong-su's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around the paper bag. "No." "Why not?" "They're gone." "Like dead gone, or like went away gone?" He looked down at her. She was watching him while she ate, waiting for a real answer, not accepting the deflection. 6 years old, and she already knew the difference between gone and gone. "Dead gone," he said. "A long time ago." "That's sad." She chewed thoughtfully. "Was it your mama?" "My grandmother." "Did she make you food like this?" Jong-su thought about his grandmother's kitchen, the smell of doenjang jjigae, her hands moving through practiced motions, the way she'd always made extra because she knew he was growing and boys were always hungry, the way she'd looked at him like he was still good, still worth the effort of love. "Yes," he said quietly. Zendoya nodded like this explained something important. Mamas and grandmas always know when you need food. She finished her hotek and carefully folded the paper bag into a small square, tucking it into her coat pocket instead of dropping it. "My mama before Mama Grace used to make me grilled cheese, but then she got too tired and the people said I had to go somewhere else." "Foster care." Jong-su pieced it together from the way she said it, matter of fact, but with an edge of something else underneath. The papers in her backpack. The way she'd said Mama Grace with careful emphasis, like she was still getting used to claiming it. "Dr. Okonkwo, that's her full name?" "Grace Okonkwo. She's from Nigeria, but she lives here now. She picked me special from all the kids because she said I reminded her of her sister when she was little. Did your grandma pick you special?" "In a way." They passed another vendor, this one selling newspapers and cigarettes. The old man running it glanced at Jong-su, then quickly busied himself with arranging already arranged merchandise. Word traveled fast in this district. By now, everyone would know he was here, moving through, not to be approached unless absolutely necessary. "Do you know what makes you happy?" Zendoya asked. The question landed like something physical.
Jong-su kept walking, kept scanning the street with the automatic precision of someone who'd learned to catalog threats before they materialized. What made him happy, as if happiness was still something that applied to men like him? "I don't know," he said, and realized as he said it that it was completely true. Zendoya absorbed this with the seriousness she gave everything. Mama Grace says if you don't know what makes you happy, you have to try new things until you find out, like how I didn't know I liked kimchi until I tried it 5 times. 5 times? It was really spicy, she said reasonably, but now I love it. Jong-su felt something that might have been a smile trying to happen and suppressed it. Ahead, the street opened into a wider intersection. 3 more blocks and we'd reach the medical district where the clinic operated. 3 more blocks of exposure, of moving through territory that was his until it suddenly wasn't. That's when they saw them. 2 men, wrong posture, wrong attention, standing at the intersection like they were waiting for a bus at 3 in the morning when no buses ran. One was on his phone, the other was watching the street with the particular stillness Jong-su recognized because he'd trained men to have that exact stillness. Cheongdam crew, scouts probably, waiting to see if he'd surface. Jong-su's hand found Zendoya's and gripped tighter. "We need to walk faster now." "Why?" "Because I asked." She looked up at him, registering something in his voice, in his grip, but she didn't question it. She just nodded and matched his pace, her small legs working to keep up as he steered them left, away from the intersection, into a narrower alley that would take them the long way around. Behind them, one of the men lowered his phone and started walking.
The alley network behind Dongdaemun was a maze Jong-su had memorized years ago, when memorizing such things meant the difference between walking out and being carried out. He knew which cameras covered which angles, which routes the police avoided, which doors opened for the right kind of knock. He moved through it now with practiced efficiency, keeping to the shadows, taking corners at angles that broke sightlines. Zendoya kept pace without complaint, her small hands still wrapped around his fingers, her backpack bouncing rhythmically against her shoulders. She didn't ask why they'd changed direction. She didn't ask about the men at the intersection. She simply trusted that he knew where he was going. Jong-su's side was a different story. The makeshift bandage had soaked through. He could feel the warmth spreading beneath his jacket, the particular wet heaviness that meant the wound had reopened. Each breath came shallower than the last. His vision was starting to soften at the edges, the alley walls losing their sharpness. "Mister," Zendoya said, slowing down, "your walking is crooked now." He hadn't realized he was listing to one side, favoring the wound, his body making compensations his mind hadn't authorized. Jong-su straightened with effort, pressed his free hand harder against his ribs. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're doing the hurt walk, like when I fell off the slide and Mama said I was being brave, but really I was just scared to cry." She stopped completely, forcing him to stop too. She pulled her backpack around to her front and unzipped it with the focused determination of someone on a mission. "Hold on." She produced a small juice box, the kind with the cartoon fruit on it, still cold. "Mama puts these in my bag for emergencies. She says juice helps when you're tired." Zendoya held it up to him. "You look very tired." Jong-su stared at the juice box, at this small girl offering him the emergency supplies meant for her because she'd decided he needed them more. The absurdity of it should have registered. Instead, what registered was the complete sincerity of the gesture, the way she was looking at him like his well-being actually mattered to her. He took the juice box carefully. "Thank you. You have to drink it, that's the rule." He punctured it with the attached straw and drank. It was apple juice, too sweet, the kind of sweet that only existed in things made for children. It did nothing for the blood loss or the pain or the men following them. But Zendoya watched him finish it with such satisfaction that he drank every drop. His phone vibrated. He pulled it out, already knowing what he'd see. His second in command, 3 messages in rapid succession. "Cheongdam knows you're moving through Dongdaemun. They're saying you have a witness. Boss, what do you want us to do?" Jong-su stared at the screen. A witness. They thought Zendoya had seen something, knew something. In their world, witnesses didn't get to leave.
He typed back with one hand, the other still pressed against his side. "Stand down. I'm handling it." The reply came immediately. "How?" Jong-su looked at Zendoya, who had gone very still beside him, watching his face with those two observant eyes. He put the phone away without answering. "Are you scared?" she asked quietly. The question was so direct, so honest, that lying felt like more effort than truth, but he lied anyway, because that's what men like him did when children asked questions that mattered. "No." Zendoya studied him for a long moment, then she reached up and took his hand again, both of her small hands wrapping around his scarred, blood-stained fingers. "It's okay to be scared," she said, with the gentle authority of someone much older. "I'm scared too. I don't know where Mama is, and everything looks different at night, and you're hurt, and you won't tell me if you're scared." She squeezed his hand. "But we have each other now. That makes it less scary." The words landed in Jong-su's chest like something with weight and edges. "We have each other." As if having each other was a thing that just happened, simple and uncomplicated, as if 12 years of building walls around himself meant nothing to this 6-year-old who had decided he was worth holding on to. He'd learned at 17 that trusting people got them killed. He'd learned that bonds were weaknesses, that caring made you vulnerable, that the only way to survive was to need absolutely nothing from anyone. He'd built an empire on that principle. He'd buried everyone who tried to teach him differently. And here was this child, holding his hand in a dark alley, telling him that fear was acceptable as long as you didn't face it alone. "Come on," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "The clinic isn't far." They moved deeper into the maze. Jong-su kept his breathing steady through force of will, kept his steps even through sheer stubbornness. The alley opened onto a service street, quieter, lined with closed shops and medical offices behind security gates. Streetlights painted everything in amber and shadow. He could see it now, 3 blocks ahead, a small building with a green cross sign, dark at this hour, but unmistakable. Dr. Grace Okonkwo's clinic, the place where a woman who saved lives worked late into the night because, according to the little girl holding his hand, you never knew when someone might need help. Jong-su's phone vibrated again. He ignored it. Behind them, somewhere in the maze of alleys, he heard the sound of footsteps that weren't theirs, quick, professional, closing the distance. He picked up the pace. Zendoya matched it without being asked, her little legs working double time, her grip on his hand unwavering. "Almost there," he said. "I know. I can see the green cross. That's how I know where Mama works. She says green means healing." 2 blocks. The footsteps behind them grew louder, more distinct. Multiple sets, not even trying to hide anymore. 1 block. Jong-su's vision swam. He blinked hard, forced it to clear. Not yet. Not until she was safe. They reached the clinic door. Dark, locked, a small buzzer on the side. Zendoya pressed it without hesitation, then pressed it again, then kept her finger on it with the insistence of a child who understood that sometimes you had to make noise to be heard. Somewhere above, a light came on.
The door opened to reveal a woman with a cloud of natural hair pulled back from her face, round glasses catching the hallway light, a stethoscope hanging around her neck over pajamas. Dr. Grace Okonkwo looked first at her daughter, then at the bleeding man holding her hand, and her expression moved through several emotions too quickly to name before settling on something between recognition and resignation. "Mama," Zendoya said brightly, like this was the most normal homecoming in the world. "I found you, and I found him too. He's hurt bad." Grace's eyes met Jong-su's. A moment passed between them, heavy with something unspoken. Then she stepped aside. "Inside, both of you. Now." The clinic smelled like antiseptic and the particular sterile cleanliness of medical spaces. Grace locked the door behind them, pulled the security shade down over the window, and flipped on the overhead lights. The waiting room was small but well kept, chairs arranged neatly, outdated magazines stacked on a side table, children's drawings taped to one wall. "Zendoya," Grace said, her voice controlled but firm. "Reception desk, coloring books in the bottom drawer. Stay there." "But now, baby." Zendoya recognized the tone.
She nodded, slipped her backpack off, and disappeared around the corner to the reception area. Jong-su heard the drawer open, heard her settling in. Grace turned to him fully. "I know you," she said. Jong-su said nothing. His side was screaming now, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving just the pain and the blood loss and the knowledge that he'd pushed too far on borrowed time. 2 years ago, Grace continued, already moving toward the examination room, gesturing for him to follow. 3 in the morning, bullet wound, no insurance, cash payment. You gave a fake name. I treated you anyway. She pulled on latex gloves with practiced efficiency. Shirt off, sit. Jong-su obeyed, peeling off his ruined jacket and shirt, revealing the soaked bandage underneath. Grace cut it away without ceremony, her hands steady and professional. "I knew who you were," she said quietly, examining the knife wound. "One of my nurses recognized you, told me after you left, told me I'd probably just saved the life of a very dangerous man." She reached for supplies, began cleaning the wound. "I also knew the oath I took. Do no harm. Save lives. All lives." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're in my clinic at 3 in the morning, bleeding, with my 6-year-old daughter." Grace's hands worked quickly, efficiently, closing the wound with practiced precision. "And I need to know if I should be calling the police or if you're going to tell me why she was with you." Jong-su looked toward the reception area where Zendoya was humming to herself, the sound of crayons on paper just barely audible. He thought about the question she'd asked in the abandoned station. "Are you lost too?" He thought about her small hands wrapped around his fingers. "We have each other now." "Because she asked if I needed help, and no one has asked me that in a very long time." Grace's hands paused for half a second, then continued stitching. "She has a gift for seeing people others miss. She was looking for you, in the night market, lost. I was here. Emergency case ran late. Her foster caseworker was supposed to—" Grace's jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter. She found me, and apparently she found you first." She finished the stitches, applied a proper bandage, stepped back to examine her work. Then she removed her gloves and looked at him directly, all the professional distance gone from her eyes. "Why is my daughter with you?" she asked again, slower this time, with the weight of a mother behind it. Jong-su met her gaze. "Because she decided I was worth helping, and I decided she was worth protecting." "Protecting from what?" Before he could answer, the security monitor on the wall flickered. Grace's eyes moved to it. Jong-su followed her gaze. 3 men on the screen, circling the block, moving with purpose, checking doorways, the kind of methodical search pattern that meant they knew the target was close. Cheongdam crew. Grace looked from the monitor to Jong-su, understanding moving across her face like cold water. "You brought violence to my daughter's door." "I know. Those men out there, what do they want?" Jong-su's phone vibrated. He pulled it out. A message from an unknown number. "We know you're in the clinic. We know about the witness. You have 10 minutes to bring her out, or we come in." He showed Grace the screen without a word. She read it. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture, like a kind of settling that happened when people made decisions they couldn't unmake. 10 minutes, she said. "Yes. And if they come in?" Jong-su stood slowly, testing the fresh stitches, feeling his body catalog its remaining resources. Not much, but enough. It would have to be enough.
Jong-su moved through the clinic with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd fortified more locations than he could count. He pushed the reception desk against the front door, wedged a filing cabinet behind it, checked sight lines through the windows. Grace worked beside him in silence, pulling medical supplies from cabinets, setting up a triage station in the back room like she'd done this before. Maybe she had. Humanitarian work in conflict zones taught you to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. "The back exit," Jong-su said, testing the reinforced security door. "Where does it lead?" "Alley. Connects to the main street 3 buildings down." "Lock it. Barricade it if you can." Grace nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Jong-su checked his phone. 7 minutes left. On the security monitor, the 3 men had been joined by 2 more. 5 now, circling. Patient. They knew he wasn't going anywhere. "Mister?" He turned. Zendoya stood in the doorway of the back room, her tiger drawing in one hand, crayons in the other. She looked at the barricaded door, the moved furniture, his hands checking the knife at his belt. "Are we playing a game?" "Something like that," Jong-su said. "It looks like the fort game, where you build walls so the monsters can't get in." She walked over to him, completely unbothered by the tension humming through the clinic. "But you're hurt. You shouldn't play yet. Mama said you need to rest." "I'll rest later." "When you're better," Zendoya said, settling cross-legged on the floor near him. "What will you do?" Jong-su looked down at her. She was arranging her crayons by color, organizing them with the focused attention of someone for whom this question was simply curious, not loaded with the weight of a man's entire existence. "I don't know," he said, and realized he'd never been asked that question, never thought beyond the next threat, the next move, the next day. Men like him didn't plan futures, they managed presents. Grace returned, carrying a metal rod from a mop handle. She wedged it through the back door's handles, improvising a brace. "That'll slow them down, not stop them, but slow them." She sat on the floor beside her daughter, exhausted and wired at the same time. Zendoya immediately leaned against her mother, seeking the comfort of familiar weight. "I came to Seoul 8 years ago," Grace said, quietly, not looking at Jong-su but speaking to him anyway. "Medical degree from Lagos, humanitarian work in South Sudan. I came here because I was tired of war zones. I wanted somewhere stable." A bitter sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "I adopted Zendoya 2 years ago. The system here doesn't make it easy for single foreign women, but I persisted. Because when I met her, when I saw this little girl who'd been through too much, too young, and was still brave enough to smile, I knew." Zendoya looked up at her mother. "Knew what, Mama?" "That you were mine." Jong-su's phone rang. Not a text this time, a call, his second in command. He answered, kept his voice low. "Boss, we can get you out. 2 vehicles, north and south approach, 15 minutes, but you need to move now." "The doctor and the child?" A pause. "We can't guarantee their safety if they're with you. We extract you, clean. They're civilians. Cheongdam won't..." "Won't what? Won't hurt witnesses? Won't make examples? You know better." "Then leave them. We'll send someone back after. Maybe, but every minute you stay there puts our extraction window at risk." Jong-su looked at Grace, who was watching him with the steady gaze of someone who knew exactly what conversation he was having. Then he looked at Zendoya, who had returned to her drawing, her small hands moving crayons across paper with complete absorption. He looked at the drawing. 3 figures, one tall in a dark suit, one with cloud hair and round glasses, one small with colorful hair clips. They were holding hands in her crayon world. All 3 of them, connected. "Boss?" His second's voice was insistent. "We're burning time." Grace had chosen to save lives, all lives, even when she knew exactly whose life she was saving. Zendoya had chosen to help a bleeding stranger because he looked lost and hurt. Jong-su had spent 12 years choosing violence over everything else, choosing power, choosing fear, choosing the kind of survival that meant everyone else had to stay at arm's length. He looked at the drawing again, at the small crayon version of himself, holding hands with 2 people who had decided he was worth saving. "Stand down," he said into the phone. "What?" "I said stand down. Pull back. I'm not leaving them." "Boss, that's..." Jong-su hung up. He turned off his phone completely, removed the battery, set it on the reception desk like an offering he was done making. Grace was still watching him. "That was your way out?" "Yes." "And you just..." "Yes." Zendoya held up her drawing, smiling. "Look, mister, I made us. See? We're all together.
That's you, and that's Mama, and that's me. We're a team now." Jong-su looked at this child who had decided with crayon certainty that they were a team, this woman who had saved him twice now without asking for anything in return. These two people who had somehow become something worth protecting more than his own life. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We are." The security monitor showed 6 minutes remaining. Outside, the men continued their circle, tightening it slowly, patient predators waiting for the moment to strike. Inside, 3 people who shouldn't have found each other, prepared to face whatever came next, together.
The burner phone rang 4 minutes later. Jong-su had been expecting it. Different number, same voice. His second in command, no longer asking, now delivering orders that came from higher up the chain, from people who didn't accept refusals. Jong-su answered on the third ring, put it on speaker so there'd be no confusion, no misunderstanding about what came next. "New directive," his second said, voice flat and professional. "The witness situation needs resolution. Clean it up. Both of them. We'll send a cleaning crew after." Grace's head snapped up from where she was checking Zendoya's backpack. Her eyes found Jong-su's across the room. "No," Jong-su said. The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. In that silence lived 12 years of loyalty, of orders followed without question, of a reputation built on the certainty that when Jong-su said something would be done, it was done. That silence was the sound of all of that shattering. "Say that again," his second said carefully. "No, they're not threats. They're not part of this. Leave them alone." "Boss, you understand what you're—" "I understand perfectly. The organization can't have loose ends. You taught me that. You've handled situations like this yourself, multiple times." Jong-su looked at Zendoya, who was showing her mother the crayon drawing with proud animation. He thought about all those multiple times, all those situations he'd handled with the cold efficiency that made him valuable to men who valued efficiency above everything else. "Not this time," he said. "Then you're making a choice. You understand that. You're choosing them over us, over everything we've built." "Yes." The line went dead. Jong-su set the phone down. Grace was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read, something between horror and disbelief, and a third thing that might have been understanding. "You just made yourself a target," she said quietly. "I've been a target since I was 17, Jong-su replied. "For once, it's for something that matters." "Mister?" Zendoya appeared beside him, tugging at his sleeve. "Mama says we have to stay here until morning. That's a long time. Are we having a sleepover?" The question was so earnest, so completely disconnected from the reality of what was happening outside, that Jong-su felt something in his chest crack a little wider. "Something like that," he said. "Then we need activities. That's the sleepover rule." She was already digging through her backpack, producing a small deck of cards held together with a rubber band. "Do you know any card games?" Jong-su looked at the cards, worn and creased from use. He thought about his grandmother's kitchen table, about long afternoons when she'd taught him games to keep his hands busy and his mind focused on something other than the streets calling him. "I know one," he said. He sat on the floor. Zendoya settled across from him immediately, cards between them. Grace watched from the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable as Jong-su dealt with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this motion 1,000 times. "It's called Hatwu," he explained, showing Zendoya the basic rules, simplifying them for 6-year-old comprehension. "You match the pictures." "Like a memory game?" "Similar, but you also have to think ahead, plan what you'll need 3 moves from now." They played. Zendoya concentrated with her tongue pressed to her lip, making careful choices, asking questions when she didn't understand. Jong-su answered with a patience he didn't know he still possessed, explaining strategy in terms she could grasp. "You're good at teaching," Zendoya said after winning her first round. "You should smile more though. You look less scary when you smile."
I'm not trying to look scary. Then you're just very good at it by accident. She reshuffled the cards with clumsy enthusiasm. Again? They played again and again. The clinic filled with the quiet sounds of cards on tile, of Zendoya's small victories, of Jong-su's grandmother's game being taught to a child who had no idea she was learning something that once meant family and safety, and the last time Jong-su believed the world could be gentle. Grace watched this hardened killer play cards with her daughter, watched him correct her grip with careful hands, watched him explain the rules with the kind of patience that suggested he remembered what it felt like to be small and learning something new. He watched the sky outside begin its slow shift from black to deep blue, that particular pre-dawn color that meant time was running out. "It's almost morning," she said quietly. Jong-su looked up from the cards. Dawn, the time when deals were made or bodies dropped, the time when men stopped circling and started moving with purpose. Outside, the security monitors showed the street beginning to fill with that early morning energy, legitimate business mixing with illegitimate, the hour when everything could still go either way. "I know," he said. Zendoya laid down a winning combination with triumphant flourish. "I win again. Best out of 7? Jong-su looked at her bright face, at her mother's worried one, at the cards scattered between them like small pieces of a life he'd thought was gone forever. "Yeah," he said.
First light came pale and cold through the clinic windows. Jong-su saw them arrive on the security monitor. 12 men in dark clothes, moving with the coordinated precision of a pack that had hunted together before. They formed a perimeter around the clinic, blocking every exit, every angle. Professional, thorough, final. Min-tae-oh stood at the center, flanked by 2 lieutenants. Jong-su recognized him from territorial meetings, from the careful dance of rival organizations maintaining their borders. Tae-oh was young for a boss, maybe 30, with the particular cruelty of someone who'd had to prove himself harder and meaner than everyone around him just to survive to 30. Grace stood beside Jong-su, watching the monitor. "That's a lot of men. 12. Can you—" No. The words sat between them, honest and brutal. No clever escape, no backup arriving at the last second, just math. And the math said 1 wounded man couldn't fight 12 healthy ones and keep 2 civilians alive in the process. Jong-su checked his knife, felt the reassuring weight of it. Not enough. Would never be enough. But it was what he had. "There's another way," Grace said, her voice urgent but controlled. "We call the police, make this public. They can't." "They can. And they will. And then everyone in this clinic becomes part of the investigation, and people who investigate my world tend to have short lives." Jong-su looked at her directly. "I go out alone. I buy you time. You take Zendoya out the back when they're focused on me. You run, and you don't look back." "You're talking about sacrificing yourself." "I'm talking about keeping you alive." "There has to be another way." Jong-su's smile was tired and sad and completely empty of hope. "There isn't. Not for men like me. There never was." "Mister?" Zendoya's small voice came from behind them. She stood in the doorway, still holding her cards, looking between the adults with that too observant gaze. "Are you leaving?" "For a little while." "Then I'm coming too." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. "You stay here with your mother. You stay safe." Zendoya's expression shifted into something stubborn, something that suggested she'd inherited more than just her mother's capacity for compassion. She set down her cards carefully, walked over to Jong-su, and looked up at him with absolute certainty. "You helped me find Mama. I help you too. That's what friends do." The word landed like a blade between his ribs, sharper than the knife wound, more devastating than anything Tae-oh's men could do to him. Friends. As if friendship was something that just happened, as if 12 years of isolation could be undone by a 6-year-old's declaration, as if he deserved to be called friend by anyone, let alone this child who decided his life had value. Grace said, "Zendoya," reaching for her daughter. "Baby, you can't—" "I have to." Zendoya took Jong-su's hand, the same two-finger grip she'd used all night. "If he goes alone, he'll be too sad. Friends don't let friends be sad alone." Jong-su looked down at her small hand wrapped around his fingers. He thought about his grandmother, about the last person who'd held his hand like it was something worth holding. He thought about the 12 years since, about all the times he'd chosen violence over connection, fear over trust, survival over everything else that made survival worth it. He thought about the men outside who were about to make sure he didn't survive at all. "Okay," he said quietly, making a choice he didn't understand and couldn't take back. "But you stay behind me, and when I say run, you run. Deal?" "Deal." Grace grabbed his arm. "You can't take my daughter out there." "She's already decided, and I won't let anything touch her. That's a promise I can keep." He walked to the door. Zendoya followed, her small hand still wrapped around his, her backpack adjusted on her shoulders like she was heading to school instead of into a circle of men who killed for money and reputation. Jong-su moved the barricade, unlocked the door, and stepped into the cold morning air. 12 men turned to face him as one. Hands moved to weapons, stances shifted into readiness. Min Taeo's expression was already arranged into the look of someone who'd won and now just collecting what he'd come for. Then Zendoya stepped behind Jong-su, her small hand still holding his, her pink sweater bright against the gray morning. The tableau froze. Taeo stared. His men stared. Everyone stared at the impossible image in front of them. Seoul's most dangerous mafia boss, standing in front of a humanitarian clinic at dawn, holding hands with a 6-year-old black girl in a pink sweater and colorful hair clips, both of them looking like they just walked out of 2 completely different worlds and somehow ended up in this impossible moment. "What the hell is this?" Taeo said finally. Jong-su felt Zendoya's grip tighten slightly. He squeezed back, 2 pulses, a message in the language they'd built in one long night. "I'm here. You're safe." Her name is Zendoya. She's 6 years old. She's not part of this. Neither is the doctor inside. This is between you and me. Taeo looked at Zendoya, then back at Jong-su. "You brought a child to an execution?" "No," Jong-su said. "She brought herself."
The standoff held for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. 12 guns, 12 sets of eyes trained on Jong-su, and one small girl holding his hand like the world wasn't about to end in the cold morning light. The early commuters walking past gave the scene a wide berth, heads down, the practiced ignorance of people who knew better than to see things that weren't their business. Taeo stepped forward, close enough that Jong-su could see the calculation moving behind his eyes. "You're protecting a kid?" "Yes." "From us?" "From everyone." Taeo laughed, the sound hollow and disbelieving. The great Jong-su, 12 years building an empire on bodies and fear, and this is how it ends, holding hands with a child in front of a clinic? He shook his head. "You've gone soft, or you've gone insane. Maybe both." One of Taeo's men shifted, a young one, couldn't have been more than 16. Jong-su recognized the type, recruited young, desperate for belonging, given a gun and a sense of purpose that didn't question what the purpose cost. The boy was staring at Zendoya with an expression Jong-su knew too well. Recognition, not of her specifically, but of what she represented. Innocence, the thing they'd all traded away too young. The boy's weapon lowered half an inch. Taeo noticed. "Daejung, raise your weapon." Daejung didn't move. His eyes were still on Zendoya, who had tilted her head and was studying him with that direct, uncomplicated curiosity she gave everything. "Mister," she said to the young gang member, "why do you look so sad?" The question hit the frozen tableau like a stone thrown into glass. Daejung's weapon lowered another inch, then another, until it was pointing at the ground. His voice, when it came, was rough with something that might have been tears trying not to happen. "She looks like my sister," he said to no one in particular. "Same age, same—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I can't." "You can and you will," Taeo snapped. "This is business. This is—" "She's 6.
another voice said. One of the lieutenants, older, harder, someone who'd been in this life long enough to have bodies stacked in his past. She's 6 years old, and she's holding his hand because she trusts him. What does that make us if we— He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The words hung there, heavy and undeniable. What does that make us? Jong-su watched it ripple through the crew. Not surrender, not fear, but something more dangerous than either. Doubt. The kind of doubt that made men question whether the orders they followed were worth the cost of following them, whether the reputation they protected was worth what it asked them to become. One by one, weapons lowered. Not dropped, not holstered, just lowered. A refusal to escalate that felt more powerful than any threat could have been. Taeo's jaw worked, fury and frustration, and the dawning realization that killing Jong-su in front of a child would make him exactly what his enemies claimed he was, a monster. Not a businessman, not a territorial boss maintaining order, but a man who murdered people in front of 6-year-olds. "This is a mistake," Taeo said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Probably," Jong-su agreed. "You're exiled, both organizations. You understand what that means. No protection, no territory, no crew. You're nobody." "I understand. You walk away from this, you're on your own, forever." Jong-su felt Zendoya's hand in his, warm and small and completely trusting. He thought about his grandmother's kitchen, about the life he might have had if he'd made different choices at 17. He thought about the 12 years since, about the empire he'd built on the assumption that power mattered more than anything else. He looked at Taeo, at the men behind him, at the world he was walking away from. "I'm not alone," Jong-su said quietly. Taeo stared at him for a long moment, then holstered his weapon, turned, and walked away. His crew followed, some reluctantly, some with visible relief. Young Daejung last, glancing back once at Zendoya before disappearing around the corner. The street was suddenly empty, except for Jong-su, Zendoya, and Grace standing in the clinic doorway with her hand over her mouth. Zendoya looked up at Jong-su. "Did we win?" Jong-su thought about what he'd just lost. Territory, reputation, the only identity he'd known for 12 years. The protection of an organization that had kept him alive through violence and fear. He thought about what he'd gained. Exile, isolation, and the unknown weight of a future he had no idea how to build. He looked at Taeo, at the men behind him, at the world he was walking away from. "I'm not alone," Jong-su said quietly. Taeo stared at him for a long moment. Then he holstered his weapon, turned, and walked away. His crew followed, some reluctantly, some with visible relief. Young Daejung last, glancing back once at Zendoya before disappearing around the corner. The street was suddenly empty except for Jong-su, Zendoya, and Grace standing in the clinic doorway with her hand over her mouth. Zendoya looked up at Jong-su. "Did we win?" Jong-su thought about what he'd just lost. Territory, reputation, the only identity he'd known for 12 years. The protection of an organization that had kept him alive through violence and fear. He thought about what he'd gained. Exile, isolation, and the unknown weight of a future he had no idea how to build. He looked down at the small girl who'd decided he was worth saving. "Yeah," he said, "we won."
6 months later, Jong-su woke to the sound of construction equipment rather than ringing phones. His alarm went off at 5:30, the same time it had gone off for the past 26 weeks. He showered, dressed in work clothes that had actual dirt on them from actual labor, and made instant coffee in a kitchen so small he could touch both walls with his arms outstretched. The apartment was nothing. 1 room, bathroom, kitchenette. No security system, no reinforced door, no escape routes mapped and memorized. Just a window that looked out at other windows, a bed he slept in without checking under it first, and silence, the kind of silence that used to make him reach for weapons he no longer carried. He drank his coffee black and bitter, standing at the window watching Seoul wake up. Somewhere in this city, men were making the kind of decisions he used to make. Territory, money, violence conducted with the efficiency of business. That world still existed. It just existed without him now.
His hands were calloused differently these days. Construction work, honest labor, the kind that paid in won rather than fear. He was anonymous on the site, just another pair of hands lifting rebar and mixing concrete. His foreman knew him as Kim Min-jae, a name he'd chosen because it was common enough to disappear into. No one asked about his past. No one recognized the tattoos he kept covered. He arrived early, worked hard, went home alone. The package arrived on a Saturday, his one day off. Plain brown paper, his alias written in careful Hangul, no return address. Jong-su opened it slowly, the old instincts surfacing briefly, cataloging threat levels and calculating risks before he remembered he wasn't that person anymore. He had no enemies worth mailing him bombs. He had no importance worth targeting. Inside was a crayon drawing. It showed a man in a yellow hard hat standing next to a small girl with colorful hair clips. Behind them, a building made of careful rectangular blocks, windows drawn in with blue crayon. The sun in the corner was enthusiastic in yellow, surrounded by the kind of rays children drew when they wanted to show happiness. A note was folded beneath it, written in two hands, one adult and careful, one child and enthusiastic. Mama Grace says I can write to you now. Mr. is building good things now. He is not hurt anymore. I colored this for you. Do you like it? I hope you are happy. Love, Zendoya. P.S. The building is what you make. Mama helped me spell building. Jong-su sat at his small table and looked at the drawing for a long time, at the crayon version of himself, rendered with the absolute certainty of a child who saw the world in clear categories, hurt and not hurt, bad and good, before and after. In Zendoya's world, he had simply moved from one category to another, and it was that simple. He carefully pinned the drawing to the wall above his bed, the only decoration in the entire apartment. Sunday morning, he found himself at the playground near the children's hospital in Gangnam. It wasn't close to his apartment, it wasn't on any route he needed to travel, but he'd heard, through the careful questions he had allowed himself to ask, that Dr. Okonkwo sometimes brought her daughter here on Sunday mornings. He sat on a bench far from the play structures, just another adult in casual clothes watching the weekend unfold. And then he saw her. Pink jacket today, different hair clips, purple and silver, racing toward the swings with the focused determination of someone on a mission. Grace followed behind, medical bag slung over her shoulder, forever prepared for emergencies even on her day off. Zendoya claimed a swing and pumped her legs with enthusiastic inefficiency, getting maybe 6 inches of height and looking thrilled about it. Jong-su watched from his distant bench, and something in his chest settled. She was safe, she was happy, she was exactly where she should be, in a world that hadn't touched her with the darkness he'd spent 12 years swimming through. "You don't have to watch from far away." Grace's voice came from beside me. He hadn't heard her approach, too focused on Zendoya, his old skills dulled by 6 months of honest work and quiet living. Grace sat down without asking, her eyes on her daughter. "Yes, I do," Jong-su said. "Why?" "Because close means complications. Close means her world and mine overlap. They shouldn't." Grace was quiet for a moment. "She asks about you. Every week, wants to know if you're safe, if you're happy, if you found what you were looking for." "What do you tell her?" "That you're building good things." That seemed right. It was right, more right than I deserved. Jong-su looked at his hands, at the new calluses that came from carrying lumber instead of weapons, from building instead of destroying. "Knowing she's safe, that's enough," he said quietly. Grace turned to look at him fully. "Is it?" Jong-su thought about the question, about enough, about what sufficiency meant for a man who'd spent 12 years believing he needed power to survive, and 6 months discovering he needed something else entirely. "I'm learning what enough means," he said finally. On the swings, Zendoya had spotted them, her whole face lit up with recognition and joy. She waved frantically, both hands in the air, the swings slowing beneath her from the loss of momentum. "Mister!" Her voice carried across the playground, bright and unashamed. "Mister, look how high I can go." Grace smiled. "She still calls you that." "I never told her my name." "Maybe that's better. Maybe Mister is who you became."
Jong-su raised his hand and waved back, a small gesture, simple, the kind of thing normal people did in playgrounds on Sunday mornings. Zendoya's smile got impossibly bigger, and she returned to pumping her legs, determined to show him exactly how high she could go. For the first time in 12 years, Jong-su felt his face move into something genuine, not the cold smile he'd used to intimidate, not the empty expression he'd worn like armor. A real smile, small and uncertain and completely honest. Grace saw it. There it is. What? The person she saw that night in the station, the one underneath everything else. Jong-su's smile faded, but not completely. Some of it stayed there, lingering at the edges like it was learning how to exist there permanently. Mama says people can choose to be different, Zendoya's voice echoed in his memory, from that last morning at the clinic when she'd hugged him goodbye with fierce 6-year-old strength. You chose, mister, and that's the bravest thing. He sat on the bench with Grace beside him and Zendoya playing in the distance, and for the first time in 12 years, Jong-su wasn't waiting for violence to find him. He wasn't calculating exits or watching for threats or preparing for the moment everything would inevitably fall apart. He was just watching a little girl in purple hair clips discover that swings could take you higher than you thought possible if you kept trying. And that, he was slowly learning, was enough.